When a woman looks at you and says, "You're too good for me," most men take it as a compliment. It sounds humble, it sounds self aware, it even sounds flattering. But if you slow down and really listen to what's being communicated beneath the surface, you'll often realize it's not admiration, it's distance. A woman who truly values you doesn't position herself below you. She steps up, she invests, she matches your effort. When she repeatedly says you're too good for her, she may be signaling that she doesn't see herself rising to meet your standards. Instead of growing into the relationship, she's subtly stepping away from it. And here's the truth most men don't want to accept. Many breakups are emotionally rehearsed long before they happen verbally. Statements like this are often early exit lines. They soften the ground, they prepare you for what's coming. It's easier to leave when you frame it as "you deserve better" rather than "I don't want this anymore." Now, does that mean every time a woman says this, you should walk out immediately? No, context matters, but patterns matter more. If she says it once in a vulnerable moment and then shows up stronger afterward, that's insecurity. But if she says it repeatedly, especially while pulling back, investing less, or becoming emotionally unavailable, that's detachment in disguise. Think about it psychologically. When someone believes they have something valuable, they fight to keep it. They don't talk themselves out of it. If she genuinely believes you're a high quality man, the natural instinct would be to rise, not retreat. When retreat becomes the pattern, pay attention. Another layer to this is accountability. Sometimes "you're too good for me" is a way of avoiding responsibility. Instead of addressing her behavior, improving communication, or fixing issues, she frames the imbalance as inevitable. It subtly shifts the dynamic from "we need to work on this" to "I'm just not enough." And when someone labels themselves as inadequate, they create an emotional gap that becomes difficult to close. What many men do in this moment is try to reassure her. They say, "No, you are enough." They double down on affection. They try to convince her she's worthy. But here's the problem: you can't build attraction by lowering your standards or convincing someone to stay. If she sees you as valuable and still chooses to step back, chasing only confirms that she has the power in the dynamic. Self respect is critical here. If a woman repeatedly implies she can't meet your level, believe her, not with anger, not with ego, but with clarity. A strong man doesn't argue someone into staying, he doesn't negotiate admiration, he observes actions. And watch what happens if you respond calmly. If she says "you're too good for me," and instead of arguing, you simply say "I'm looking for someone who feels aligned with me," and you lean back, her reaction will tell you everything. If she steps up, invests, and proves otherwise, there's potential. If she drifts further away, she was already halfway gone. Respect cannot exist where value isn't mutually recognized, and if she consistently frames herself as unworthy, she may be slowly convincing herself to leave. A man with standards doesn't hold on to someone who's preparing to walk away. And when you recognize that early, you leave before she does. When a woman says she needs space, that alone is not the problem. Space can be healthy, space can allow emotions to settle, space can give clarity. But the real issue isn't the request, it's the behavior that follows. If she says she needs space while still acting like she's in a committed relationship, being respectful and maintaining boundaries, that's one thing. But if she asks for space and suddenly starts acting single, it's a completely different story. This is where many men confuse hope with reality. If she says she needs time to think, but at the same time becomes secretive with her phone, more active on social media, going out more frequently, posting attention seeking content, or emotionally detaching while keeping you on standby, that's not reflection, that's exploration. And exploration, while you're expected to remain loyal, is not confusion, it's convenience. A woman who values you protects the relationship even when she's uncertain. She doesn't blur lines. She doesn't keep you emotionally hooked while she tests other options. Respect looks like clarity. Even during distance, there are boundaries. If she removes those boundaries but still expects your patience, you're no longer in a relationship. You're in a waiting room. The mistake most men make here is accepting vague language. "I just need space." "I need to figure myself out." "I don't know what I want right now." These phrases can mean many things, but behavior reveals the truth. If her actions suggest she's emotionally available to others while you're expected to stay committed, you're being slowly downgraded. And here's the psychological trap: when she pulls back and acts single, many men try to win her back harder. They become more attentive, more available, more forgiving. They think if they show patience and loyalty, she'll appreciate it and return stronger. But in reality, it lowers perceived value. When you accept blurred boundaries, you communicate that you're afraid to lose her, and fear weakens attraction. Space should never mean disrespect. If she truly needs time, the energy remains calm and contained. There's no sudden shift into party mode. There's no inconsistent communication that keeps you guessing. There's no mixed signals that create anxiety. If those signs appear, it's not about growth, it's about keeping options open. And you must understand something critical: a woman who sees you as her best option does not risk losing you casually. If she believes you are rare, she moves carefully. She doesn't gamble your presence. So what should you do in this situation? You don't argue. You don't accuse. Coach, you don't beg for reassurance. You calmly acknowledge her need for space and you give it fully, but you also pull your investment back. You stop acting like her boyfriend if she's not acting like your girlfriend. You don't remain emotionally exclusive to someone who is behaving independently. This is about standards, not ego. If she comes back after space with clarity, consistency, and increased effort, that tells you something. But if she drifts, keeps you on the side, or returns only when other options fail, that tells you even more. A strong man doesn't compete for a position that should already be his. He doesn't sit on the bench while someone explores the field. He recognizes when space is growth and when space is a slow exit. And if her version of space looks like freedom without accountability, you don't wait around to see how it ends. You leave before the disrespect becomes permanent. When a woman tells you you're insecure every time you try to express concern, it can feel confusing at first. Most men hear it and think, maybe she's right, maybe I am overreacting, maybe I'm too sensitive. But the truth is that repeated accusations of insecurity are rarely about your feelings at all. They are a subtle form of manipulation. She's trying to shift the focus from her actions to your emotional response to make you question yourself instead of holding her accountable. Healthy communication in a relationship is about mutual respect. When something bothers you, you share it. When something bothers her, she shares it. Boundaries exist for a reason, and expressing them is not a sign of weakness. But when every attempt to communicate your needs or concerns is turned back on you as insecurity, you start to feel like you're always walking on eggshells, questioning your own judgment. That's intentional. When she consistently frames you as insecure, she is testing how much you'll tolerate emotional disrespect before you break your frame. It's easy to fall into the trap of apologizing for your feelings. You start thinking, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I shouldn't care so much. And that's exactly what she wants. She wants to erode your confidence to see if she can get you to bend her narrative. A strong man recognizes this pattern immediately. He understands that concern about her behavior of the relationship is not the same as insecurity. Insecurity is weakness without boundaries. Concern expressed with clarity and calmness is strength. When you respond from strength, you shift the dynamic. You don't argue, you don't get defensive, you simply acknowledge her words, maintain your composure, and stay grounded in your truth. For example, if she accuses you of being insecure after asking a simple question about consistency, you calmly state that your feelings are valid and your boundaries are clear. You don't attack her, you don't try to convince her, you simply protect your emotional frame. That's where real respect begins. Many men fail at this because they mistake emotional reaction for emotional honesty. They think that if they remain calm too long, she will see them as weak or distant. But the opposite is true. Calm composure under emotional pressure signals emotional intelligence, self respect, and stability, all of which are deeply attractive to a woman. When she realizes you cannot be shaken by guilt or manipulation, she begins to see you as unmovable, unshakable, and rare. This doesn't mean you accept repeated disrespect. It means you define what behavior is acceptable and communicate it without aggression. If she continues to weaponize your emotions against you, you see it as a red flag. It's not a relationship challenge to be fixed. Attraction cannot grow where respect is absent, and a woman who constantly labels your concern as insecurity is eroding that respect. The most important part is that you maintain your standards. Coach, you don't try to prove your strength to her. You don't overcompensate to show that you are confident. You simply continue living your life, leading your mission, and honoring your values. In doing so, you create clarity. Either she respects that standard and adjusts her behavior, or she chooses not to align, in which case you have the power to step away before being emotionally drained. When you refuse to accept the repeated inversion of responsibility, when you maintain your composure and your boundaries, you reclaim the dynamic, you demonstrate that emotional manipulation will not define the terms of your relationship. You communicate that respect, honesty, and maturity are non negotiable, and nothing less will satisfy you. And that is why a man who recognizes this pattern walks away before the relationship erodes further. When a woman tells you, I love you, but I'm not in love with you, those words are more than just a phrase. They are a signal, often delivered gently, to communicate a shift in her emotional state. On the surface, it sounds polite, even kind. She's trying to soften the blow. She wants to avoid confrontation or guilt. But beneath that kindness lies a clear message. Her desire has faded. Attraction is not something that can be negotiated once it diminishes. And when a woman verbalizes that shift, it's a warning that things are moving in a direction that's beyond your control. Many men make the mistake of trying to reverse this moment with logic, charm, or promises. They think if they just explain their feelings better, work harder, or demonstrate loyalty, they can rebuild the lost attraction. But attraction isn't built on pleading or persuasion. It thrives on respect, admiration, and the natural polarity between masculine and feminine energy. When she tells you she's no longer in love, it's not a commentary on your value. It's a statement about her current emotional investment, and that cannot be forced back into existence through effort alone. This is where a man's standards come into play. You have to understand that a relationship requires mutual desire to thrive. If she's already mentally checked out, staying will only erode your own sense of self respect. Trying to cling to someone who has withdrawn emotionally communicates desperation, dependency, and lack of boundaries, qualities that are the opposite of the masculine confidence that originally attracted her. Attraction is not maintained by being available to someone who doesn't fully want you. It is maintained by your ability to hold your own frame, Regardless of her temporary feelings, a strong response in this situation is not anger, not pleading, not an emotional display of heartbreak. It's calm, measured acknowledgement. You recognize the truth of her words without compromising your dignity. You don't argue over her feelings because emotions cannot be rationalized. You don't try to manipulate her back into love because that would diminish your value in her eyes and yours. Instead, you step back and honor your own standards. You only engage in relationships where desire, respect, and commitment are mutual. This approach does more than protect your pride, it creates clarity. Women often test boundaries without realizing it. When you respond with calm detachment rather than emotional chaos, you communicate a powerful message. You will not tolerate inconsistent investment. That clarity can trigger reflection. Sometimes after feeling the loss of a man who embodies strength and self respect, a woman will reevaluate her feelings. She may return with genuine attraction and renewed respect, but crucially only if she sees that she had to make a choice. Rather than being convinced or pressured, it's also essential to recognize the difference between temporary uncertainty and a firm decision. A woman saying, "I'm not in love," is usually not an emotional flare up. Coach, it's the natural conclusion of her feelings at that moment. Respecting that moment, stepping back without begging, and continuing to live your life fully is the only way to maintain your self worth. Trying to reignite something that has already faded only traps you in a cycle of diminishing returns, and it slowly erodes the masculine energy that initially drew her in. A man with awareness knows that true value lies not in convincing someone to feel what they no longer feel, but in preserving his standards, integrity, and emotional autonomy. By doing so, he positions himself to either meet a woman who genuinely desires him or to move on without regret, knowing he acted with strength rather than desperation. And that is why walking away when desire is clearly fading is the only choice that maintains both dignity and long term attraction. When a woman says, "Why can't you be more like him?" it's one of the most subtle yet damaging statements a man can hear. On the surface, it may seem like a small complaint, almost casual, but beneath those words lies comparison, judgment, and a quiet erosion of respect. Attraction and admiration cannot thrive when a woman measures you against another man. A man's value in her eyes is built on uniqueness, consistency, and the strength of his masculine energy. When she begins comparing, she is signaling that you are being evaluated rather than appreciated. Comparison is a quiet form of disrespect because it implies you are not enough as you are. She is placing another man, an ex, a coworker, a friend, even a celebrity, as the standard, and you are falling short in her mind. That undermines attraction because admiration cannot coexist with constant judgment. A woman who truly respects you will celebrate your qualities, not highlight deficiencies. When she questions why you're not more like someone else, she is expressing dissatisfaction while simultaneously challenging your frame. Most men respond in one of two ways. Some try to compete with the other man, thinking they can prove themselves better. They work harder, overcompensate, or adjust their personality to match what she seems to value. Others internalize the comparison, letting it erode their confidence over time. Both approaches are dangerous because they shift the power dynamic away from you. A man who tries to prove himself loses the natural authority and self assured energy that originally attracted her. A man who doubts himself begins to chase validation, which diminishes attraction even further. The correct approach is to maintain composure, respect your standards, and refuse to engage in the comparison at all. You don't argue, you don't become defensive, you don't try to emulate someone else. You simply remain grounded in your own value. Confidence is not about matching someone else's traits. It's about knowing your worth and living it unapologetically. When you respond from strength, not insecurity, you reassert your frame without confrontation. This is also about recognizing boundaries. A woman who constantly compares you is signaling that her emotional investment is contingent on someone else's presence. She is not valuing you for who you are. And a man with standards cannot stay invested in someone who sees him as replaceable. Attraction grows from admiration, respect, and emotional polarity, not comparison and critique. The moment you accept being measured against another man, you lose all of these foundations. It's important to understand the psychology behind this as well. When a woman compares, she is often testing your response. She wants to see if you will bend, chase, or try to win her approval. By standing firm, remaining calm, and refusing to validate the comparison, you communicate a rare message. Your worth does not depend on her approval or someone else's presence. That firmness paradoxically increases attraction because it reinforces emotional strength and stability. A strong man recognizes that respect is non negotiable. He understands that admiration is earned naturally, not forced, and he knows that if a woman cannot honor him as he is, her investment is never going to reach the level required for a healthy, committed relationship. Instead of wasting energy trying to compete, he preserves his dignity, focuses on his own growth, and either attracts a woman who genuinely values him or moves on. When she realizes that comparison cannot sway you, that your frame is unwavering, she either rises to match your standard or she walks away. Either outcome preserves your value and strengthens your sense of self, and that is why you must leave a woman who constantly compares you to another man. When a woman tells you, I don't know what I want. It can feel confusing and frustrating, especially if you've invested time, energy, and emotion into the relationship. On the surface, it sounds like uncertainty, coach. Like maybe she's just overwhelmed or needs time to figure things out. But in reality, when this becomes a repeated statement or pattern, it's a sign that she has already made her decision internally, and it's often not in your favor. A woman who is genuinely attracted, committed, and aligned with a man rarely struggles with clarity. She may have moments of reflection or doubt, but she ultimately knows where her heart and desire lie. Chronic uncertainty is usually indecision disguised as contemplation. The danger here is that many men interpret "I don't know what I want" as an opportunity, a chance to convince her, to win her over, or to prove themselves. They double down on affection, availability, and emotional energy, believing that if they show enough care, patience, and loyalty, she will choose them. But the truth is that attraction and commitment cannot be manufactured through effort alone. A woman's clarity about what she wants is rooted in her emotions, her respect for you, and the alignment of her values with yours. When those are absent, no amount of chasing or convincing will create genuine desire. This is where a man's standards and frame are essential. A strong man recognizes that repeated statements of uncertainty are not a reflection of his value, they are a reflection of misalignment. He understands that investing in someone who cannot decisively choose him undermines his dignity and weakens his masculine energy. Attempting to hold on to a woman who is unsure communicates scarcity and desperation, which are the opposite of the confidence and stability that originally attracted her. The correct response is calm observation and boundary setting. You acknowledge her statement without begging for clarification, without pleading for certainty, and without trying to manipulate her emotions. You continue to live your life fully, pursuing your mission, maintaining your social and professional commitments, and strengthening your emotional and physical presence. You make it clear through your actions, not words, that your time and energy are valuable and that you are not waiting in uncertainty for someone who cannot choose you. It's also important to understand the psychological impact of this approach. When you maintain your standards and do not react emotionally to her uncertainty, you create contrast. Many women are drawn to men who are self assured and emotionally stable, even in the face of ambiguity. Your calmness communicates that you are not dependent on her decision for your happiness. That detachment is magnetic because it positions you as a man of autonomy and strength, qualities that naturally inspire desire and respect. However, if she continues to remain unsure despite your clear boundaries and composed energy, that is a signal. Uncertainty is a decision in disguise. She is effectively choosing not to commit, even if she cannot verbalize it directly. A man with self-respect does not wait for someone else to figure out their feelings while his own life stagnates. He moves forward, preserving his value and emotional integrity. A woman who is meant to be in your life will demonstrate clarity, alignment, and mutual desire. Chronic indecision is rarely resolved by chasing. It is resolved either by her stepping into clarity independently or by her leaving. Recognizing this distinction early protects your dignity and prevents emotional erosion. When a man honors his own standards, refuses to chase, and preserves his frame, he ensures that his energy is never wasted on someone who cannot fully invest. He positions himself to attract a woman who genuinely wants him, rather than clinging to someone who is unsure. And that is why a man never stays with a woman who constantly says, "I don't know what I want."